Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Creeps, Creatures, and Haunts.
Oh my!
In today's episode, we are going to be talking about synchronicities. If you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's kind of loose. There's a few different explanations and stuff of it, but the actual definition is the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection. In layman terms, that mean that weird stuff is happening that really doesn't have meaning, but it's weird that it's happening because you just thought of something, so kind of like a coincidence, but not. Kind of stuff like that. We have a couple personal accounts and stuff. We'll probably talk about some other things like synchronicities, beliefs, and spirituality, and and stuff like that. So I don't know, where do we want to? We don't plan these episodes. So where do we want to begin here, Cam? Because I know we both have a couple personal things we want to touch on, and I have a weird story, which I don't even know if it's necessarily considered a synchronicity. So we're going to say that this episode also is just going to be odd coincidences and just strange. I mean, I think that kind of is synchronicity.
I think that's
things
what
are
kind of it
syncing
is.
together.
Yeah. Because I think that's what it is.
So, I mean, one thing about the synchronicities, too, beliefs are, people, reading here, this, the law of synchronicity operates from the belief that our souls attract people, places, and events into our lives that help us grow, develop, make meaning, evolve in consciousness. So I guess that right there, so basically this is kind of a belief that, and I guess maybe we'll talk about this more later because this is something that I kind of loosely believe in, is that we are all in some way, what's the right word here? Psychically connected. I think there's a more complicated word I should be saying there, but that we're all connected spiritually in some way, almost kind of on the same wavelength type of thing that kind of attracts us to one another. And that life will kind of lead you along a certain path that you're supposed to follow, almost kind of like a fate type of thing. So I guess we'll talk about the one example, that you were talking about earlier, and I'll kind of let you kind of lead on with this since you were the one that initially brought this up.
Okay.
So I'll let you.
All right. So on that definition of it, I had recently broken up with my ex, and I was just really down in the dumps, and I just didn't want to hang out at the house or anything like that. So I had called my mom, and she's like, "Why don't you come over for the weekend and hang out?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And she's like, "Yeah, come on, just get out of the house. We'll come over here. We'll do some stuff or just hang out or whatever." So I come over, and I happen to be on my computer or something because we were watching a TV show or whatever. I usually play on my computer while we watch TV and stuff. And I'm like, "Oh, hey, there's this ghost walk thing going on in Peninsula right over there by, it was for Lonesome Lock, which is right behind Winking Lizard. You've probably heard us talk about it before.
Which we'll probably do an episode eventually of for Haunted Adventures.
So I'm like, "Oh, this sounds kind of interesting, but, I said I was going to hang out with you." And my mom's like, "You should go." And I'm like, "No, I promised to stay with you," and stuff like that. And she's like, "No, I think you should really go. You should get out of the house, get your mind off of things, and just go do this." Because she knew I was into, the paranormal and stuff like that. I hadn't really, I'd gone on, a few ghost walks and stuff like that. And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And she's like, "Yeah, go. Have fun." So I ended up going. Well, the people that were running it were just ridiculous. First off, I never walked so frickin' fast in my life. Now, okay, if you've ever been to Lonesome Lock, from Winking Lizard, it's easily a mile.
It's a little further than a mile. It's probably 2, I would say, close to 2. I would think it's a fair hike back.
Good walk.
Yeah, it's a good
walk back there. These people were power walking and looking for fairies at the same time. So they were had their arms out and they were speed walking. And I mean, there was different age groups of all these different people here. I mean, there were people that were in their 50s and 60s and stuff like that. And then there were younger kids that were keeping up and stuff. Well, I'm I want a ghost hunt. And so I'm lagging back. And I meet a group of people who were also lagging back. him being one of them. And so I'm like, hey, do you guys mind if I hang out with you guys? Because I actually want to, like, investigate. And these people that were running this walk were not doing any of that. They must have made, like, plans and forgot about it. And were like, oh, crap, we have this walk that we have on the same night. We need to get this done and over with so we can go do this other thing.
Yeah, it was very abrupt, and they were then trying to like leave. And to be precise, it was weird because there's this tunnel that's on the way back, and we had thought that basically everyone else had basically passed through. So I think it was me, my cousin, and our friend Moose at the time. I think that's who it was. I think there's the three of us. I think it was just those. I think. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Was Kim there too?
Yeah,
okay.
Kim was there as well.
But we had a laser grid set up for this tunnel to, like, see if there's any spirits walking through or not at all. And then that's when you kind of like stopped and waited behind and were talking to us and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess like the moral of that story is too, like, if and I mean, this can be so much in life. If you didn't do one thing in life, how much of an impact it could have. Like if her mom would have just been like, yeah, I'd prefer if you stay with me. And it's not even so much like, yeah, like we would have never met, but you also have to think of like in things like this, like all of these time chunks that you might spend with another person, or maybe if it's a job or whatever it is that this one thing in life took you to, your life would be completely different because what would be filled in those time slots instead?
Yeah.
And it's really an interesting thing to ponder upon because there's how many times do you go someplace and it doesn't matter, Maybe you have went to an event and you're like, oh, if you wouldn't have went to that event, it wouldn't have really changed your life in any significant way, at least not that you know of.
Right. Because you can't see both timelines. Right. So you don't know.
Because there's also, of course, been like, descriptions of, say, someone, they plan on, let's just say, going on this flight to something, and then there's a family emergency or something happens, they don't get to go, and then they find out that there is this, maybe the plane crashed as an extreme, or maybe something bad happened in the area they were going to be going to.
Yeah.
Or like maybe you're supposed to drive somewhere, and then there's this huge pile-up that you might have coincided with, or maybe you were unlucky and you were one of the people in that pile-up. Where if you would have like had one other stoplight, like one stoplight, or would have been the difference of you not getting in that crash.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird to think of this kind of spiraling effect. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of, I guess, like what more like the butterfly effect is, what they kind of talk about.
Yeah.
With stuff like one small little change can like really really alter everything. And I find that really kind of interesting. And it is also weird because one of the big things of synchronicity, and they actually have this listing on Google, is like hearing a certain name all of these times. Like you hear it throughout your life a lot, and then all of a sudden you end up finding out that name is the name of the road where you find your dream house, and you spend your life. That's another good example of synchronicity, or like maybe seeing a certain like, and people will base stuff off of synchronicities without even realizing that what it is that they're doing. Like let's say you go to a cash register and someone rings up your Subway sandwich or something, and your total is $7.77. Now you might want to go play the lottery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like if you actually would win that lottery, and then like either it'd be that or even creepier, maybe it's you win like $777 or something,
Oh my gosh.
Like that stuff happens like so often. I feel like another big one that happens to me a lot is I'll have never heard something before. Never have heard of it, like whatever it is. And then maybe I watch a television program of it and I learned about something new. And then 2 days later, someone brings it up. And, I never heard of it before. And all of a sudden someone's like, oh yeah. And they just like casually bring it up in a conversation. You're like, that's so weird because I've lived my entire life without hearing about it. Now that I've heard about it 2 days later, this other person brings it up. Yeah. And maybe this other person has known about it for years. So it's weird that this is the one point in time where they brought it up, Yeah. And that can kind of, I feel like, lead to the idea that maybe we're psychically connected.
Yeah. Yeah, because maybe they, like, it implanted into their head, and they're like, oh, I should tell so-and-so about this. And turns out, they were thinking about it.
Right.
So, yeah, for sure.
It is really odd to, like, that kind of thing. Now, the story that I have, I think this would classify as a synchronicity. But it's definitely a weird series of coincidences. And one of the strangest things, it sounds made up, but it is not made up, and it is crazy. So this happened a couple years ago. My dad owns a garage in Hanoverton, Ohio. He owns a garage in Hanoverton, Ohio. he was working on a guy's car, and this guy, I believe, lived in Cuyahoga Falls. So a fair distance from Hanoverton. That's like, what, at least an hour and a half away from it for a drive. So unfortunately, that car was stolen from my dad's property on the night before the guy was supposed to come pick it up. My dad, of course, says, hey, this car got stolen. At the time, he didn't have, like, cameras outside of the building. So the guy had to drive from Cuyahoga Falls to Hanoverton to file a police report. On his trip to Hanoverton, I believe he got a flat tire, one of his tires blew. Either way, he had to have a tow truck come and get him, and the guy, of course, is and this was about halfway between, I think he said he was around, like, between Canton and Minerva area, I think is where my dad said this happened to this guy. So now we're in, like, Canton, Minerva area. If you know anything about Ohio, that's, like I said, that's about a midpoint. So the tow truck driver that comes to fix this guy who has the car, he starts complaining to him about how terrible of a day he's had, obviously, and that his car got stolen, and then as he's going there to file a police report, his car that he's that he's actually currently driving broke down, and so the guy's like, oh, what is it? So the guy told him, I don't remember the car, but it was like, my dad fixes like old-fashioned cars, he does body work on them. So he tells him about that, and the guy's like, oh, that's interesting. Well, actually, he showed a picture to the tow truck driver of the car, and he's like, that's interesting because I live in Alliance, Ohio, which is about another 30 minutes away from this exact location they're at now. So this guy's already kind of far from home. He's like, I live in Alliance, Ohio, and there's a car that looks like this in a field right down from my house. So the guy calls up my dad, and my dad goes there. It was actually that car. The odds of these things happening is so astronomical. Like, it has to be 1 in a million chance that it just so happens the guy that's, so about 45 minutes away, this guy stole the car, took it to Alliance, left it in a field for some reason. We still to this day don't exactly know. We don't have proof of who did this or why exactly. There's ideas, but that's besides the point. Left in his field in Alliance. The guy just happened to break down on his way from Cuyahoga Falls there in Minerva, and then a guy who, for some reason, lives in Alliance, came there to tow him, and it was like, oh, this car is actually right down from my place. And it actually was. Like, the fact of the odds of these things all happening together and leading to the finding of that car through these series of events is so unbelievable to me.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just... It's just really, really weird.
It is really weird. Like, the odds of that, yeah, like...
Yeah. But I mean, so I don't know, like what, and the odds of like these synchronicity things too, I mean, like some people just believe they're just coincidences, and nothing more than that, nothing weird about it. I mean, it's strange, but nothing like supernatural is involved here. And of course, then you would have those that do say stuff like it is spiritual and we are spiritually connected, and, psychically connected and stuff like that. I mean, where do you kind of fall in the camp of belief as far as this goes?
I do, well, I mean, I'm more of a spiritualist to begin with, so I believe that we are somehow connected in some way, shape, and form, and yeah, we are destined to meet people at a certain point in time, so I guess I'm more of the spiritual thing of, I think we're all psychic connected.
I would say that I tend to kind of believe this a bit. Now, I don't know if I believe in destiny as far as like, there's, like that we're destined to do a certain thing, but I do believe that there are, I mean, it's proven that obviously we have brain waves and stuff like that. And I do think there is a psychokinetic connection between people and stuff that kind of leads you to one another and leads you towards certain things, and that there's a communication that's happening between people and they don't even realize that they're communicating.
Okay.
I definitely think that is. So I don't know if that's necessarily spiritual or not. I guess that might be more of like a pseudoscience, like a science that's not like proven yet. But I mean, there's been too many times I feel like where things like this have happened to me, like where I'll think about something. I mean, the amount of times it happens between me and you, and I mean, and again, it tends to be like when people spend a lot of time together, this happens where like you kind of like, you've probably experienced this, listener or viewer, where you like will be able to finish each other's sentence. I mean, the amount of times where like we both will say something at the same time, like we both have like the, like the same idea about something. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're kind of off the wall things where I'm thinking it and then one of us is thinking it and then we beat the other one to saying it. And it's like, it's really freaking weird because I was just going to say that idea and it might be like a 1 in a million kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It is really strange. And I mean, like, is there a logical explanation for these things? I mean, some of it, yes. You kind of learn each other's patterns and you kind of start to think one alike. But when it gets to like this high level stuff, and especially when it's with strangers, that's when it gets really weird. Like, you know, I don't know. I just think it's really, I think it's just really strange and it's interesting. But you hear like these stories that are kind of like 1 in a million odds, pretty regularly, like in the news and stuff. Like I know one big one, I just heard of it. I think it was another podcast I was listening to, that Box of Oddities one that I like to listen to, where one of the things they were talking about was, so this guy, and I didn't look this up, so I don't have the names in front of me, but I know the basic story. So it wasn't a guy, it was actually a girl, and she found out, like, through being adoption stuff, that she actually had 3 blood siblings. She managed to find her one brother and, like, the other brother or sister or whatever, but then she went years and years, right, looking for this other person. And she could never find the other person. You know, she looked all across the country, basically the world, like, looking for this other person. Do you want to know why she never found the other person? They lived across the street from her. What?
Okay.
There's like billions of us out there in the world. Like, and this is something you hear about, like, not that uncommonly.
My aunt actually had that happen to her, and I'm glad you brought that up because my aunt was looking, back when she was alive, she was big into, like, genealogy and stuff like that, and she wanted to find, and this was before, like, Ancestry, and where you could literally type in your name and be like, here's all your relatives. She actually did research, like, at the library and things like that. And she happened to be in this town where she had found in research that there were some people that may be related to her. So just on a whim, she's driving down this road and she sees a farmhouse. And she's like, I'm going to see if they know where this person lives. Because she had a name. She knocks on the door and she's like, hey, so I'm looking for this certain person. Do you know this person? And they're like, yeah, that's me. And it was just on a whim. She literally just turned at the first house she saw and was like, I'm going to ask this person if they know this because it's a small town. They might know this person. You know, you're in the middle of the country. Everybody knows pretty much everybody. Yeah, she turns in. She ends up finding the person she was looking for. Like, literally answered the door. She found that person was able to connect her with a bunch of other relatives from this side of the family that she was looking for and stuff like that. And she was able to figure out, like, all this rest of the family tree that she had, like, you know, empty, so to speak. And, yeah, it was just on this whim that she was there. She was heading into town, going to do some research. And she's like, you know what, I'm just going to stop at this house. And she found her family that way.
And so, you know, I mean, that kind of story that really leads to, like, really, I think, leads strongly into the belief that we are psychically kinetic because, like, connected. Because, I mean, what are the odds of that doing that in a whim? It's like, did she describe the fact that she felt an urge to go to this house?
She just was like,
something kind of like almost told her, something inside her said, I mean, obviously it had to.
Probably.
I mean, there's no way that you don't just, like, something in her head be like, stop at this house.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it had to. I mean, like, pretty much, when you're saying voice in your head, I don't mean necessarily like people literally talking, but we all have like that voice in our head that kind of is like, when you even just thinking like, I need to go do this thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, but I mean, like, if something in your head's like, I need to go do this, like, why? And then for it to actually relate and then, you know, actually lead to the fact that this is the person she was leading to. Or just like moving into a house across from your sibling that you didn't even know was your sibling. Like, it really kind of leads you to believe that maybe we are connected in some way through thought and we don't really know it, or that we are drawn to one another in some way, I guess. And I mean, like, something like that too, would it almost kind of like, so like you have like psychics and you have like readers and stuff like that, like tarot cards and that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like this is a similar type of
Yeah,
thing.
because the way that tarot, because I'm actually researching it, and hopefully soon I'll be doing
Yeah.
some readings. I've been researching tarot and I've been reading a book about it. And it is basically you're using your own intuition to read these cards. And the cards is just kind of like a guide. Like it might say, you might see like, one thing, but your mind is telling you something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't done anything with like reading other people and stuff like that, but from what I hear is a lot of times you'll get signals or messages from that other person. And it'll be like, well, I think that you should do this, or this card is telling me that you need to do this instead of what it normally means. Like it might be the opposite of what it means. Like maybe it's the lovers. And the lovers is, it's a man and a woman. And most of the time it means love, or you're going to have some sort of connection with, a romantic connection with somebody. But it also could mean friendship. It could mean you're going to reconnect with somebody. Or, it could mean, you are going to reconnect with a relative. It just means something like you're going to reconnect with somebody, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But it could mean the exact opposite, depending on how it's facing, or whatever you get in your intuition. If you're reading another person and they're sitting there and you're just getting this vibe, like you're like, this card doesn't mean what you think it means. Because, usually when you see that kind of card, you see lovers, you're like, oh, it means I'm going to like, fall in love with somebody. Maybe not. Maybe it means, you should hold off. Or
Right.
maybe it means like...
It's like a sign.
Yeah, it's a sign for like,
It's all signs, but yeah.
Yeah. So like, you don't know until you get that vibe, and it's just kind of weird. Like, yeah, you get like different vibes with different people, and I do think that we're all psychically connected in some way, shape, or form.
And it is interesting too, because like sitting here and really reflecting on it a little bit, obviously it seems like these type of things come in waves. Like sometimes there's a whole bunch of them that are happening. You're getting a whole bunch of synchronicities and coincidences and weird stuff. Like I know, for example, and it's me and you had talked about this a while ago, is like during when like the coronavirus and that really was at its peak and really starting, and we were all like, you couldn't go anywhere or do anything. I would have a lot of things where I would have thoughts, and like these thoughts would end up coming true with like things at work. Like I would have like a thought that like a certain thing would happen at work, like a certain situation with a customer or something, and then it like would, or I would think about something and then I would see it on TV. Mm-hmm. And it was happening a lot. And I wonder if it's because maybe since we were all sort of distressed that it was, and like we were all like physically away from each other, maybe like the psychoconnectivity between all of us was getting stronger. Yeah. Because we couldn't actually relate, we couldn't actually be close, we couldn't really speak except over the phone. That maybe like
that need,
and unconsciously,
for it.
Need for it was bringing us together, and it was like, I mean, have you never noticed anything like that? That it kind of comes in waves, or maybe if you're more like, in situations that are more dire or more troublesome or more, let's say, intense. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing.
Yeah, I feel like I get like certain like sometimes you just don't want to go to work, and then you find out that this happened when you like skipped that day. Well, like maybe you're like, oh well, I'll let so and so pick up my shift, and then you find out that the shit hit the fan that day, and you're like, thank God I wasn't there, because you just felt like you're just like, I shouldn't work that day.
But I'm even like, I mean, it was to the point where it was like more specific than that, where like, and I don't like getting into details necessarily about exactly, work and stuff like that on here, but like, like certain, it is like almost exact situations I would think about in my head, or I would have a dream about it, like with a customer, and then that would actually happen that day. Not necessarily like, it would be like very specific in a way, and it wasn't even just work, but it was just, I'm using work as an example because during those times, my work never closed down at all. So that was one of the few things that stayed normal, because it was that, and then I would basically come home and watch movies or play video games, because again, you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And it was, still cold out when it started, because we live in Ohio, and March is March, April, May, you have no idea what you're going to get.
Well, I had something like that happen, but it was like years and years and years ago. And I kind of think it's more of like a deja vu kind of thing. But it could be one of those synchronicities, I guess. I had a dream, and it was a full-on conversation that I had with coworkers at work. I remember where everybody was standing and things that were happening and the whole thing. Fast forward, like weeks later, the exact thing happened.
Yep.
And I actually kind of laughed because I'm like, hold up. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I'm leaving this conversation because I already had it.
Yeah.
And I left. I like walked out of the conversation because it literally was like, this person was standing here, this person was standing here, I was standing here. Everything happened exactly. And I even knew what this person was going to say and what this person was going to say. And I was just like, I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, no.
I'm so glad you just brought that up because it like literally you can't really, I'm like getting goosebumps because this was so creepy, and I believe it was last week or the week before. So and again, where I work at a cell phone store, I'm just sitting back doing paperwork, whatever, and my one sales representative that I work with was kind of sitting over here, and she's with the customer, and I'm sitting there doing my paperwork and listening to her talk, and I'm like, man, it feels like I've lived this before, right? Like really hardcore deja vu, and deja vu is freaky as well. And then out of my coworker's mouth, she goes, ugh, deja vu real bad right now. And I'm like, and like my heart stopped. I remember, because I don't even think I said anything to about her because, again, she was with the customer and I kind of forgot to bring it up. And you just jarred my memory. But I was so freaked out because I'm sitting here thinking, man, like this is weird. Like I swear I've lived this. And then she says it too.
That's funny.
And I mean, me and her, because like she's not a spiritual person like much at all that I know of. Like me and her have never even talked about deja vu or anything really like that. And for me to think it and then for her to say it out loud, and then she said, ooh, deja vu. And then she continued on the conversation. Nothing else ever came of it. I don't really know what was deja vu necessarily about it, but isn't that weird?
That is weird.
That's really, really odd to me that happened. And it's creepy. Like, why would we both be experiencing that?
I don't know. Yeah, that's really strange because I've never had deja vu with another
double deja
person.
vu.
Yeah, I've never had that. I have a lot of premonition dreams, and I actually haven't had any in quite a while, which is kind of weird. But that's it's kind of strange that I would have that one, and it had it was mundane. There was absolutely nothing that was of importance anything. Like the conversation we were talking about, I work in a restaurant and it had to do with food, and it was stupid. It was a stupid little thing, and it was just like, why would that be the thing that I would have a dream about? I mean, the only thing I could think of, and this is unfortunate, but it happened like years later. The person I had this conversation with and that was in my premonition dream, he actually passed away. He was actually he was murdered. But I never really thought about that until like now. But like, what was the significance of that dream? Why did I have that dream? Why did that, deja vu or synchronicity or whatever it was happen? There was nothing significant of it. It wasn't like I was seeing like a big event, like somebody having a baby or somebody getting a promotion or something like that. No, we were having a stupid conversation about food. And it just, it was stupid, plain and simple.
But you said that though, this conversation actually did happen though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was just...
Well, I wouldn't say that. I don't know if I would correlate it to the leading of almost predicting the death, though, if that conversation nothing to do with that, maybe. I mean, but...
No, the conversation had nothing to do with that. But why did I have this premonition of this person? In this conversation?
Well, and that's kind of an interesting thing, I guess, to say, too, because if you obviously are someone that does believe in premonitions and stuff, like, why would you only have premonitions of major events, right? Like, why not? I mean, and like maybe more people do have premonitions, whatever you want to call them, of more mundane events, like you're saying. Mm-hmm. But if we weren't really talking about this right now, it probably wouldn't be something that was on your mind because you kind of think about it and you kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And that might be where deja vu comes from too. I feel like a lot of deja vu might come from like premonition dreams, and like most of my dreams, unless I write them down or they are very like impactful in some way, I do not remember. The only way I remember my dreams is if I actively talk about them or if I were to write them down. But like if I do not do either of those things, I generally forget. Once in a while someone might say something and they're like, oh yeah, I did have a dream about that or something. But maybe because the brain's really weird in how it like stores stuff in your subconscious.
Yeah.
You know, so that might be a reason that we feel deja vu even as well. You know, and it is really interesting. And I think that it happens too much to me to just think it's always just a coincidence. I mean, sure, maybe sometimes, obviously, but it happens too much. Where I mean, and again, I don't know if I necessarily believe in the spiritual aspect of it, but I do believe, at the very least, if not spiritual, there's some kind of science that we do not understand behind it, and how we communicate with one another subconsciously.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic and subject, and I know there's a tons of different beliefs, and we're no expert in anything here. We're just kind of talking about our own experiences with it in general. But I mean, it's just so strange. I mean, yeah, it is really weird. I mean, you know, and feel free if you're listening or watching, send us a message or leave us a comment if you're watching the video. And any of the experiences like this, you know, that you have had, because I do think it is a very interesting thing, and I think it's a lot of things that like people, and that's the other thing too. As I was going to say, I guess, you know, you had talked about never having a double deja vu moment, but how often? Now I know you said there's this incident works, but if you're experiencing deja vu, do you usually tell it to people? Do you usually just come out and say in the experience you're having it, be like, I'm having deja vu right now?
It depends on who I'm with.
Right. But I would say 8 times out of 10, I usually don't bring it up. I usually am like, oh, that's weird. And I think about it. Now, if I'm with you and it's happening, I might say it. But generally, I wouldn't just bring it up. Like, if I'm in with a customer, if I'm in a grocery store, I'm not just going to, like, go to I'm having deja vu right now, Mr. Person.
Yeah,
you know?
like, if it's somebody I know. Like, if it's you or my mom or anybody else that I'm, like, friends with, then, yeah, I'm going to say, you know, oh, deja vu. But yeah, if I'm at work and it's just some random Joe, I'm not going to be like, oh, I've seen this before. And they're going to be like, okay, crazy person, just give me my food. Thanks.
And I feel like with me that's generally when my deja vu happens, though. Very rarely do I have deja vu with friends and stuff. It's usually like random things that I'm doing throughout my life, which is odd. And maybe you know, some of that can be explained away with saying like, oh, well, deja vu is harder to have with your friends because you're more used to these routines of doing things with them, where deja vu is more susceptible if you're in a situation you're not usually in and you see something that's similar to what you've seen before and your mind feels that way.
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, that might be a way to, like, rationally explain it some of the time. But, I mean, then there's a time, like, with me and Cam where we had double deja vu, my coworker, and, like, that's just really strange to me. Or there's some times where it's so specific and it's so overwhelming that, like, you said at work and you're just like, nope, not.
Yeah,
this is so freaky, I'm not staying.
It was really freaky. I walked it, like, after experiencing, like, it was only like a couple minutes of the conversation, but I found myself, I was like looking at the one person and I knew what they were gonna say, and then I look at the next person and I knew what they were gonna say, and I said the thing I was gonna say, and then I'm like, wait a second, I've already seen this. And I'm like, nope, I'm done, and I walked away. I was just like, nope, I know how this conversation ends, goodbye. I'm breaking it off right now.
And another thing that I'm curious now, because these type of things that are, you know, more in our heads and more spiritual, more psychic-y, whatever, tend to be more prominent when you are really acknowledging them and talking about them more.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see if after doing this episode, if I start to experience a little bit more of these things. And as a viewer, if you're listening to this, feel free to come back to this and let us know if you, after listening and thinking about this more, experience anything like this. You know, and we're kind of straying off the path of just straight up synchronicities here, I think. But synchronicities kind of, I mean, again, the description, and this is also by Carl Jung, I guess, is the guy that first described this. He was a psychoanalyst psychoanalyst. He described the phenomenon as events appearing meaningful, related despite having no causal connection, which is the definition. So that's a pretty broad thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting subject, and there's probably things we could ramble on for an eternity about it. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm sure if we racked our brains, we could think of a million different examples of this, but I think that's also the point.
Yes.
Is that there's a million examples of it, and I know you pretty much walk up to anybody, and these are things that we generally do not express too often out loud to other people, because it can sound a little weird, when you're talking about it. But
not everyone is as open,
right,
as you might be, and they might be like, "You're a crazy person. Get away from me." If you tell them, we've already had this conversation, or I've already met you before in my dream that I had 3 weeks ago, they're gonna be like, let me just call 911 here.
Odds are they've had this too, though, and they just suppress it, and they're just like, nope. Yeah. Kind of the same thing with someone that might not believe in ghosts at all. When weird things happen, they're just if they can't explain it, they just kind of brush it off and be like, yeah, no, I'm good on that. I'm just not going to think about that anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like that. But when you're actually looking for things, you're actually thinking about it. That's when you tend to start noticing these type of things more.
Yeah.
But that does it for this episode. If you are listening, make sure to leave us a review and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast listening platform of choice. Like I said, some like Apple Music will let you leave us a review in that. Please do. It helps us out a lot. We don't have a lot, and we're trying to keep making these podcasts. We're on our set where this will be our second season now we're on, but if we let us know you actually listen and like these, so we know to keep making them, because it is a lot to keep doing on both platforms. If there's something else you'd rather see, let us know that. But we appreciate you subscribing and rating very much. And if you're listening to the video form, you can also do the podcast thing, so that way you don't always have to watch the video. But if you are watching it, we appreciate that too. Like and subscribe the video, ring the bell notifications so you don't miss anything. And either format you're listening, there are all kinds of links in the description below. Some of them are affiliate links, so if you're interested in the equipment we use and stuff like that and want to purchase it for yourself, it's there. We do food review boxes, or we review food boxes and other restaurant stuff like that, so make sure you check that out. We also have a Patreon. If you would like to be our first Patreon, that would be amazing. That would be just absolutely fantastic of you to support what we do. We will see you in the next episode.
Hey.